These are the key points that I've been using for 25 years. I think they're true then. I think they're true today. I think they'll be true in 25 years. And I think that's what successful investing is all about. And the first point is know what you own. I can't believe how many people own stocks and they couldn't describe to an 11-year-old in 2 minutes or less why they own this thing or what it is. If you actually pin them down and you put a whip to them, they'd say the sucker's going up. That's the only reason they have for and this is the normal kind of company that people buy. A very simple story. I own a lot of companies like this. They make a relatively mundane product. It's a 1 megabit SRAM CMOS bipolar risk floating point data I/O array processor with an optimizing compiler. Now, if you own a piece of shit like that, you will never make money. Never. Somebody come with more whetstones, less whetstones, big mega flop. I mean, what do you do if this thing goes from 12 to 9? Do you buy more? Do you walk around the block? I mean, do you call your friends? I mean, what the hell do you do with something like that? People buy this stuff. I mean, I buy stuff like Dunkin' Donuts and Stop and Shop and CVS and made money in all those. And Sally Mae was just here right before me. I mean, there's a stock I bought. They had a great name. It was Student Loan Marketing. I mean, who would ever buy anything like that? It was a great name. If you heard the story, I think if 100 people heard the story, I think if 100 people looked at Sally Mae, they would have bought it. But 100 people wouldn't look at it because imagine loaning money to students. Imagine doing anything with students. And it was a great story. It was simple and no one looked at it. So that's the kind of stocks I like to buy. But I'm telling you, people don't do this. And I'm talking sophisticated people, unsophisticated people. They don't know what the company is. What's the story? And it's very important to know it because it doesn't always work. And you have to keep posted. Now, here's a big point. Remember this one. It's futile to predict the economy, interest rates, and stock market. I mean, people keep trying to do this. I mean, this would be useful. I would love to know when we're going to have a recession. I'd love to know when interest rates are going to go up or down. I'd love to know when the stock market's going up. That would be helpful. I would like to get next year's Wall Street Journal. Unfortunately, you don't get it. I remember in 1982, we had 20% prime rate, 15% long governments, double-digit unemployment, double-digit inflation. I don't remember anybody telling me about that in 1980. I remember everybody telling me about that in 1981. But in 83, I remember they said, well, the economy's bounced back. We're in a recession in 85. In 85, they said we have a recession in 86. In 87, something happened in October 87. I forget what something happened in October 87. Celtics lost 7 in a row. Something bad in 87. They said for sure we'll have a recession in 88. And they said 89 for sure we'll have a recession. And then 90, we're supposed to have the so-called soft landing, which we never had. So I've always said if you spend 13 minutes a year on economics, you've wasted 10 minutes. All you need to know about the stock market is it goes up and it goes down, and it goes down a lot. And that's all you need to know. Again, it'd be terrific to know what's going to happen in the economy, but I deal with facts. If inventories are going up, if copper prices are going down, if room occupancy is going the wrong way, people building too many hotels, I look at freight car loadings when I own railroad stocks. I deal with facts. I don't deal with people tell me something's going to happen in the future. You might as well call the psychic hotline for that stuff. I think you have a better average. You got plenty of time. This is true of Sally Mae, it's true of Dunkin' Donuts, it's true of Stop and Shop. People are so insistent, I'm that way too. I have to fight it. They have to buy a stock, let's say it's now 501. I haven't found a stock yet today, I gotta find a stock before sunset. You could buy Walmart 10 years after Walmart went public. Let's say you're a very careful investor. You waited. You said, I don't know if this company can make it. You waited for Walmart to roll it out. You could buy Walmart 10 years after they went public and made 30 times your money. 30 times your money. 10 years after they went public, they're only in 15% of the United States. 1.5. They hadn't saturated the 1.5. You could say, well, why can't they go to 17? Why can't they go to 19? I mean, why don't I take a leap of faith here? Why can't they go to 26? All they did for the next 3 decades was roll it out. You could buy Walmart. If the day they went public, you bought it, you would have made 500 times your money. If you waited 10 years in Walmart, you made 30 times your money. You got plenty of time in this business. What I'd like to talk about is what I call the 10 most dangerous things people say about stocks. Here's a good one. If it's gone down this much already, it can't go any lower. I remember when Polaroid went from 140 to about 107. People said, if you ever get Polaroid under 100, you got to buy it. You just back up the truck, buy the stock. Stock you get to 110, then rally, fall 103, you go 112, go 105. They said, gets under 100, buy Polaroid. Polaroid broke 100, people started buying it, and within 9 months, the stock was 18. So just saying it's gone down this far, how much lower? I mean, it's crazy, but, it can keep going. In fact, I tried this out. Kaiser Industries, I was a new analyst at Fidelity, and we were about to buy the biggest block ever at Kaiser Industries. The stock had gone from 29 to 17. We're about to buy the largest block ever in the history of the American Stock Exchange. We bought, 10 or 15 million shares. At 15 3/4, I said, my God, the stock's gone from 29 to 17. How much lower can it go? So we bought this enormous block at 15 3/4. So I called my mother and I said, Mom, I guess stock at Kaiser Industries, it's 10. So about 3 months later, said, you ought to buy this. It's gone from 29 to 10. How much lower can it go? Well, it went to 9, it went to 8, it went to 7, it went to 6, it went to 5, it went to 4. Now, fortunately for me, this happened very rapidly, or I'd be working at the Stop and Shop back and behind the lines instead of Fidelity. So fortunately, this was compressed in only about 6 months. So I had to go to the fund manager and say, I was a little bit early on this at 15 3/4. We call this premature in the business. Had a correction, which, you know, is a euphemism for losing a lot of money rapidly. So I said, let's check this again. The stock's 4. They own 45% of Kaiser Aluminum. They own 59% of Kaiser Steel. They own 38% of Kaiser Cement. They own all of Kaiser Electronics, all of Kaiser Broadcasting, which had 7 TV sets. They own Jeep. They had Kaiser Fiberglass. I said about Kaiser Sand and Gravel. They had a bunch of other Kaisers, and they had no debt. Now, in this room, because I know no one's ever gone bankrupt without any debt. Now, that would take a real, I think you have to give some kind of distinguished service award to somebody who did that. But they had no debt. I said, it's not going to go to 0. You know, I was wrong when I said it can't go below 15. So we hung on, and within 3 years, they gave out the shares in Kaiser Steel, gave out the shares in Kaiser Cement, gave out the shares in Kaiser Steel and Aluminum, and they sold off all the businesses. You got about $55 a share. But if you didn't know the story, and the stock went from 15 to 11, and you're just saying, how much lower can it go? When it went to 9, went to 8, you would have gone. So you can't just say it can't go any lower, because I saw Taco Bell go from 14 to 1 in 1974, and they had no debt and making 60 cents a share. There's a corollary to that that's even more dangerous. If it's gone this high already, how can it possibly go higher? Philip Morris, adjusted for splits, sold for 12 cents in 1951. Then it goes to 60 cents in 1961. So it goes up 5-fold, and you say to yourself, how much, this never sold for that, but adjusted for splits, you say, how much higher can this go? It's gone up 5-fold. They missed the power of Marlboro. They missed there's 220 countries in the world. They missed the cash flow of the company. They missed everything. This stock was a 100-bagger after going up 5-fold. But people sold it just saying, how much higher can it go? Can't go any higher. They did the same at Home Depot. They did the same with Toys R Us. I did the same thing at Toys R Us. Just saying it can't go any higher, it's gone this much already, that's very dangerous, and don't use that one. It's a very bad thing to do. Eventually, they always come back. Here's another one that sucks. That's a technical stock market term we just use only in the stock market. RCA just about got back to its 1929 price when it was backed out by GE. Manville never came back. International Harvester, even with its name changed and adjusted for splits, hasn't got all the way back yet. Western Union, double knits, remember those wonderful things? Floppy disks. They don't have to come back, but they say eventually they always come back. Not true. Here's a great one. It's $3. How much can I lose? This is a great one. I don't have a computer and I can't do high-level math, but just do this one. So let's say your neighbor buys $10,000 of a stock at 50, and the stock's now 3, and you put $25,000 in at 3. If it goes to 0, who loses the most? A lot of people cannot answer this question, you know. I mean, if you put $1 billion in at 3, you can lose $1 billion. I mean, they blow taps on lots of companies every year. You know, they can go to 0. Here's a good one that helped me a lot. It's always darkest before the dawn. This business is terrible. It's awful. You ought to buy the group. This is not a good way of making money. Here's one you're probably talking about before lunch. Freight car deliveries. In 1979, there was 96,000 freight cars delivered in the United States. 2 years later, it fell to 45,000, the lowest in 23 years. It goes from 96,000 to 45,000. People say business is awful, it's horrible, pathetic. Then it falls to 25,000. They say, just load up. There's about 15 opportunities to lose money here. There's about 15 suppliers of freight cars, 15 manufacturers. Business was awful. Well, last year we shipped 7,000 freight cars in the United States. The business just continued to be miserable. And there's even greater opportunity to lose money on energy services industry. This, we all had a great opportunity to get our heads handed to us. In 1982, there was 11,000 of those oil rigs drilling those holes all over Oklahoma and Texas and Colorado. We used to have the rig count every week. And the rig count fell from 11,000 in 82 to 6,000 in 83. Then it fell a little bit lower in 84. And there's hundreds and hundreds of companies here. Companies that made the muds and did the downhole stuff, the fracturing companies, the well companies, all the measurement companies, the Schlumbergers, the bid companies. Lots of opportunities to lose money here. There's an equal opportunity here for serious losses. And the people said, listen, the business is terrible. Let's buy these groups. Well, the rig count was only 1,000 3 years ago. So it went from 11,000 to 6,000 to 5,000. Then 8 years later, it was under 1,000. The industry really started to turn about 2 years ago. So just saying the business can't get worse. I was lucky enough, in addition to having the metals industry when I started Fidelity, I had the textile industry, which is a great group to follow. Because you follow companies like J.P. Stevens, who was founded in the 18th century, and West Point Pepperell was founded in the 18th century. These people have been through recessions, depressions, world wars. They've seen it all. There's a great expression in the textile industry. It's always darkest before pitch black. Now that's a good one to remember, because when business is terrible, it can get considerably terrible. It can get terrible to the power of 6. And you ever watch Jeopardy and people come out, they will know those numbers. Remember, they'll know the numbers. And they'll know what country Box took his first vacation in, and they'll know Phil Rizzuto's batting average and what his wife's first name was, and they'll know the stock symbols of Xerox before it was Haloid, or they know everything. And you watch the show, and you feel like an absolute idiot watching the show, because they answer all these questions. But they're really smart. I've owned this stock before, King World. Right after it, they show Wheel of Fortune. And what happens is they'll have this word up there, and it'll be TH, and there's a T, and it's like buy a vowel here, I buy a U, buy an I. Vanna spins the wheel, and they buy the A, and you're redeemed by watching the Wheel of Fortune after feeling like an absolute jerk on the Jeopardy game, and it's really smart. When I rebound to 10, I'll sell. Here's a great rule. Somebody buys a stock at 10, and it falls to 6. They say, if it gets back to 10, I'll sell. Now, I think the math, 4 and 6, I can handle this level math. I think that's about a 66% return. You ought to buy it. If you think it's going back to 10, you ought to buy the hell out of the damn thing. But they think if it gets back to 10, I'll sell. Now, what you ought to do is never put down a round number, because I think for the next 26 years, the stock will be between 5 and 9 1/4. It will never get to 10. So maybe put 9 1/8 or 8 3/4. But just saying the stock, if it gets back what I paid for it, this is a very important rule. This is one of the key rules. The stock doesn't know you own it. Remember that. You could be a miserable person. You could have never helped anybody, never done anything right, had 67 spouses, never done anything right. If you own Coca-Cola the last 50 years, it's gone up 300-fold. You could be the greatest human in the world, help Special Olympics, help the mentally challenged, help poor people, help AIDS people. If you own Bethlehem Steel, it's lower than it was 30 years ago. It's not your fault. Don't take this personal, But people treat stocks sometimes like their grandchildren or a puppy. They think the stock knows who you are. It doesn't work that way. I don't have to worry. I own conservative stocks. I remember when Con Ed fell 80%, then tripled. Public Service Indiana went down 90%. Gulf States Utilities, Long Island Lighting. This may be an oxymoron. We had Quality Texas Banks that went to zero. We had Quality New England Banks that went to zero. These were companies that have been around for 150 years, 120 years. Saying I own conservative stocks, I don't have to worry. And I've seen a lot of people that inherit a stock from somebody. They'll say, my mother said on her deathbed, don't sell the Long Island Lighting. You always wondered, she's going to heaven, or hopefully where she's going to heaven. They talk about a Little League game or a vacation or a game of hearts they had, or imagine talking on your deathbed about Long Island Lighting. And you say, but you get these stories all the time. And I think your mother would have noticed, she wouldn't have sold at 29, but she would have noticed they had this little plant that was about $6 billion over budget, and no one wanted it, and wasn't working, and Long Island stopped growing. So maybe she would have turfed it at 22 or got out at 18. She wouldn't have let it go to 4. So just because you inherit some stock and it's so-called conservative, like Eastman Kodak fell 75%, IBM fell 75%, don't tell anybody you own a conservative stock. Companies are very dynamic. I don't buy that argument. Here's a very dangerous one. Look at all the money I've lost. I didn't buy it. People do this all the time. They say, I didn't own Blockbuster, I didn't own Home Depot, I didn't own Toys R Us. Eric, it was very nice to say some nice things about when I came up here, and Manny has been nice to me. I in one of my books listed on 2 pages, in the 13 years I ran Magellan, I listed, I think, about 200 stocks, A through L, on the New York Stock Exchange. They went up tenfold or more that I didn't own while I ran Magellan. I had owned lots of stocks. I listed 200 stocks, A through L. I stopped at the letter L, and I didn't own any of these shares. They went up tenfold or more, and I was able to do okay with Magellan. And people worry all the time about missing Microsoft, missing Western Digital, missing United Airlines. They spend all their time worrying about stocks they miss. You cannot lose money in a stock you don't own. The only way to lose money is buy a stock, have it go down, and sell it. That's the only way. And I swear that their spouse has to cut out the newspaper in the morning, cut out the C's, and the person will look at the Amazon. Oh my God, Microsoft's up 3. I was going to buy 1,000 shares of Microsoft. I lost 3,000 Microsoft last night while I was sleeping. I was going to buy 7,000 shares of National Semiconductor at 10. It's now 17. I just lost $49,000 on National Semiconductor. They do this all the time. They have to cut holes. Thank God Blockbuster finally went away, because that was early in the alphabet. People would always be looking how much they lost on Blockbuster. I missed that one. I'll catch the next one. That usually does not work. Toys R Us, there was a lot of copycats of Toys R Us. There was Child World, there was Lionel, there was copycats of Home Depot. Buying the next of something usually doesn't work. It's very bad. It's like buying on dips. I think it's always better to buy from dips. I always thought it was a better rule than buy on dips. You may have to explain this to some other people. This is another technical term you may have to explain after hours what a dip is. usually referred to as plurals, dips. I never heard dip. You know, he's a dip, or she's a dip. Usually only the plural tense for it. And it's a gender non-specific. It's usually plural. Dip is never used. Stock has gone up, I must be right. Stock has gone down, I must be wrong. I'm convinced that people do this all the time. They buy stock at 10, they buy a little bit of it, it goes to 13. They now say they don't know anything more about it than they knew when they bought it at 10. They have no idea what this company does. It's gone to 13. Now they take a second mortgage in their house and buy it at 13. The best thing that can happen for us is stock go directly from 10 to 4 for these folks. It's going to go to 4 eventually, but it goes to 13 in the middle. They're convinced now, they bought 100 shares at 10, now they buy 20,000 at 13. And all the fact is the stock went from 10 to 13 is it went up. The average movement of a stock on the New York Stock Exchange this century, between its high and its low, has been 50%. The average stock in the New York Stock Exchange. That means the stock started the year 20, sometime during the year sold 16, sometime during the year sold at 24, might have finished the year 21, might have finished the year 19. The average range of a stock on the New York Stock Exchange is 50% in 12 months, between its high and its low. So stocks go up and down a lot within a year. And say this stock is going up means you're right, doesn't mean a damn thing. So don't buy often on that one. That is not a good one. Avoid long shots. These are the companies that, we have this very technical term for this called whisper stocks. Everybody familiar with whisper stocks? They're great. So they call you up and they'll say, hi Pierre, how's Carolyn's? How's Beth doing? How's Annie? How's Mary? Have you played any golf? And then they'll say, I want to talk to you about international blivet. And they'll get a shorter term in those places where they have Nordic tracks and they put them away and they don't have to make big rocks into small rocks. They just watch movies and they have Nordic tracks, but they will not get these people if they whisper into the phone. And these are always these long shots. You know, these are the stocks that are going to grow hair and make your kid have better spelling and your breasts can improve and you won't have to iron your pants. I mean, it's one of those stocks and they always do everything for you. But they're missing, they don't have any sales yet. You know, that's the missing element of the story. The story is sensation. There's no profits here, no sales yet, but my God, if this works, it's going to be the next Xerox, you know, and it's going to help Burr in space and everything. It's a very, very good deal. Now, this is not a long shot. This is a no shot. You have to separate these out. I've tried 30 of these. I have never broken even on a long shot. Never. I've made 25, 30 times my money on some stocks. I never thought about Sallie Mae or MBIA or Fannie Mae or some of the banks or Stop and Shop. I'd make 20 times the money, 30 times the money. I had no idea. I thought the stocks were going north. I had no idea. You look back 10 years later, you say, my God, I made a lot of money in this thing. But once I went into thinking I could make 4 times my money, I've never broken even. So don't do the long shot, guys. They don't work. They simply don't work. And again, if a stock's 3 and it has huge potential, write down the story, take the stock symbol. If it's going to 300, it's okay to buy it at 15. Check in later, check a year later, see if it's still listed, see if you still get a quote on it, see if they still have any earnings yet. But if it's going, write the story down. Some of these work. I haven't heard yet, but maybe they will work. But it's worth tuning in 6 months later. Don't buy it then. The single most important thing, very hard to measure. I've always said, I'd like to have a company any fool can run, because eventually one will. And you really want to do that. When I bought Toys R Us, they had the formula right. Any 4 people in this room and me could have run Toys R Us. We wouldn't have done as well as they did. They're spectacular. But for the next 15 years, we had no competition. We had a great formula. We could have rolled with it. They probably would have done 3 times as good. They were the frosting on the cake. But they had the formula right, no competition. The department stores know what they're doing. There's no copycats. And they were going to just roll for the next 25 years. So I want the story to be solid. If management can add anything on top of it, that's great. I want to buy the story. Assume management leaves the next day and they're replaced by the next generation. That's fine with me. If management can add something to it, that's great. I'm not going to buy it because people say they have great management. Because you'll notice great management is always attached to stocks been up the last 8 years. You ever notice that? Now we'll get to the important stuff. There's always something to worry about. This is the difference. This is what happens in the stock market. Because, see, everybody's got the brain power to do well in the stock market. The question is whether you have the stomach for it. That's the key organ in the body. There's always something to worry about. If I went to school, grew up with a kid in the 50s, in the decade of the 50s, there's this big theory that the depression was caused by a stock market crash. Totally wrong. Less than 1% of Americans own stocks in 29. We had this big time recession. In fact, it was a depression. It wasn't caused by the stock market. The economy went down, the Federal Reserve raised interest rates, and we had a big time depression. In fact, we had several depressions like that from 1850 on. This was only one of about 8 depressions since 1850. But people thought the only reason we got out of the depression was World War II, and they said once we get back, next time we have a recession, we're going to have a depression. And it's going to be a great depression. I never understood that adjective in front of depression. Now, it ought to be crummy depression or bad depression, but it was a great depression. I never quite understood that one. So people weren't buying stocks in the 50s because they thought that another great depression was going to happen. In addition, people were very scared about nuclear warheads and nuclear war in the 50s. People were building fallout shelters, stocking canned goods. There's something about going to Vermont, building a fallout shelter, putting canned goods in it, that you don't buy Minnesota Mining or you don't buy Eastman Kodak. I mean, the syllogism just doesn't work out that you're buying lots of water, buying a shotgun, buying frozen food that will stay in the freezer with your own generator, and you're looking at growth stocks. Doesn't seem to work out that way, you know. And I remember in the 50s, I mean, I remember literally in classes, I was in elementary school in the 50s, and they would come in, they'd have one of these air raid drills. Somebody in a yellow hat would come in, they'd blow a whistle, and you'd get under your desk. Even then I says, I don't think this is going to do a lot of good, you know. But people were worried about a depression and nuclear war in the 50s. And then, I mean, the warheads, they couldn't do much damage back in the 50s. Now one of these Stan countries, you know, these Kakistan and Kazakhstan, all these Stan guys that have spun off, these Friedman building spin-offs from the Soviet Union, they didn't lead it. It was a co-deal with somebody else, like Goldman Sachs, and they were on the left side of it. Every one of these little countries has enough warheads to blow the world up 88 times. Right? Who's built a fallout shelter lately? You know, we stopped worrying about it. I mean, there's always something to worry about. In the 50s, it was depression and nuclear war. The 50s was the best decade this century for the stock market, except for the 80s. Only slightly better. The 80s were only slightly better. People didn't expect a lot. Okay, it wasn't a great decade. They just didn't expect much. We made it through, and the stock market was terrific. And I think as the older you get, the more nervous you get about these things. I think it's very valuable. I think while younger people are better investors is they're not worried. They haven't heard about all these crises. And they're with children. I think if you don't have any kids, you got to rent some kids for the weekend. You know, get a 7-year-old and ask him if he knows about the money supply, you know, how fast it's growing. Ask him if he knows about the shape of the yield curve is the wrong shape of the yield curve. Or that we're 48.3 months into the economic recovery and the average recovery lasts 52.3 months. You know, ask an 8-year-old if they know about that. 8-year-olds have a very high expectation about the next 20 years. That's what you need to do. The more you get away from 11-year-olds, the more you start reading these crazy things you read over the weekend. So I have no idea when the market's going to go down and no idea when it's going to go up. I'm totally shocked the market was 4,000 2.5 years ago. I had no idea about this. Very surprising to me. But I'll guarantee you the market will be a lot higher in 15 years. It'll be a lot higher in 25 years. What it's going to do in the next 1 or 2 years, I don't have any idea. And if somebody in this room knows about it, they're not telling anybody. Or if they know anything about interest rates. Because in interest rates, if you can be right 5 times in a row in 10 grand, you can have 2 billion. There's not that many people with 2 billion. There's a lot of people predicting interest rates. Did you ever think about that one? Just 5 times right in a row in 10 grand, 2 billion. So I don't worry about that. I know we've had a century and the market's fallen 53 times. We've had 53 declines of 10% or more. So 53 declines in 96 years. Once every 2 years, we have a 10% decline. Of the 53 declines, 15 have been 25% more. So 15 in 96 years, about once every 6 years, the market falls 25% or more. That's what we call a bear market, you know, and it's going to happen. I don't care when it's going to happen. I would love to know. Obviously, it would be very useful to know when it's going to happen. It doesn't make a difference to me. Corporate profits will be a lot higher 8 years from now, a lot higher 16 years from now, a lot higher 30 years from now. That's what I deal with. When do you sell stocks? When you sell a stock is exactly the reason you buy it. You write down the reason you bought it. That's what you're looking for. The reason you buy a stock, you keep it posted. If the reason changes, you go on to something else. Do you believe the S&P 500 market is expensive? Yes. I don't believe in diversification at all. I would own one stock if I could find one great stock. Diversification is a big mistake. I call it diversification. You buy this thing that might balance this other thing and they both go down. I don't believe in diversification at all. I would own one stock. But what I do believe in is if I find 10 good stories, they're all equally attractive, I buy all 10. And I wait to see them unfold. It's like watching 10 poker games. 10 games of stud poker. You watch the cards turn over, story 3 gets better, story 6 slips, story 7 stays the same, but it goes up 50%. So you sell 7 and buy 2. That's all I do. So if they're equally attractive, I buy all 10. Then gradually some story says, oh my God, this is getting better and better. And guess what? The stock just went down. So you keep watching 10 stories and magically, because of that rule of stocks going up and down a lot, then you load up. You really, take a big advantage. So that either happens because something happens to the company or the market goes down and all stocks go down. They're in the 5th inning of the current bull market. This is also bullshit. The only difference, this is more current bullshit.